welcome to Microfiche Microphone. I'm Micah, and on this channel we look at microfiche from the past, old newspaper articles in the public domain. We look at them with our modern eyes, our modern perspective, and see what we can learn from them. On this microfiche time capsule, we are looking back at the Gentleman's Magazine from February 1800. And I thought this one would be interesting because this article is entitled Retrospect of the 18th Century, Essay 1. So since it's called Essay 1, I'm assuming that there's going to be more than one. I have no problems going over them. I am interested to see if I am familiar with very much of this history, because this is kind of why I wanted to do this, was to become more familiar with history and to learn more about it. And so I am not a history expert. If I were, I wouldn't need to read these, right? I should already know it. But this is why this is interesting to me. Retrospect of the 18th century, how many things can you list off the top of your head that happened in the 18th century? Now, especially since this is a British magazine, I don't know if I'm going to know very many of them at all. So I am interested to learn more about history of the 18th century. And so I'm hoping I can find more than one of these. If I can, I will read more of them. This is hopefully going to be a series because that is very interesting to me, having a retrospective of the previous century at the end of that one. So just in case you were not sure, you didn't know this, a century actually starts in the year 1. Yeah. So 1800 is actually the last year of the 18th century, and then 1801 is the first year of the 19th. So this is a retrospective of the previous century up to that point. Anyway, the only thing that I can think of off the top of my head that happened in the 18th century, well, I guess I can think of a couple things. I can think of the American Revolution. I can think of the Spanish Inquisition, I believe, is in that century. But, there isn't a lot. There's not a lot of details, so I'm interested to see what they have to say, and I hope that it is something that we can learn from. I hope it's not too much Latin. I hate that. All right. In the prosecution of this subject, the introduction to which was inserted in page 3, we observe that the 18th century commenced with Britain's beholding the wise, judicious, and magnanimous William III on her throne. Okay. Its opening was propitious, so, if not prophetic of, the wonderful occurrences as well as the repeated successes, which it is now our business to recount. Through the skillful and equitable government of this monarch, blessed with the smiles of divine providence, the nation had fully recovered itself from the awful visitations of God, under which it had labored for nearly the whole of the preceding 100 years. Interesting that they saw it that way. I wonder why they... interesting. Perhaps no equal period of time was ever so distressing to Britain or so destructive to the prosperity of her inhabitants as the 17th century. Really? Therein historians have to enumerate some of the greatest evils which can befall a nation, unfortunate beyond precedent in her princes. The first, peaceable, but I can't quite read that, but I'm not actually sure what it means. Pusillanimous? I'm going to Google it. Pusillanimous? Showing a lack of courage or determination. Timid. Pusillanimous is the word that is. Preferring an inglorious repose to the rights and honors of his people. The next, through pious and brave, misguided by his counselors, involved his country in all the horrors of a civil war and tragically ended his reign and life under the hands of a public executioner. That's legit. And during the interregnum, though this nation had then adopted the now fashionable name of a republic, the usurper ruled with the most despotic hand, destroying every establishment, the church and state, and under the cloak of religion was guilty almost every enormity, especially in his private conduct, which could stain the character of a governor. And therefore he most certainly was, as Lord Clarendon characterizes him, though a great yet a very wicked man. Was that Henry VIII? I believe he was 17th century. Oh no, that was earlier. My bad. That's 15th century. Was when he was born, and he reigned in the 16th. So no, that was earlier than that. Okay, I'm actually going to quickly look up the succession of the kings of England so that we can follow along. So, I don't know them well enough to know, like, the succession. Kings of Queens of England and Britain. This is from historicuk.com. Sounds like a good source of information about this sort of thing. Okay, blah, blah, blah. We got to jump up to the 17th century, which begins at 1601, yeah? Okay, so it started with Elizabeth, it looks like, daughter of Henry VIII. And then you had James I and VI of Scotland, 1603 to 1625. Charles I, 1625 to 1649, which was part of the English Civil War from 1642. Okay. Yeah, Oliver Cromwell. Hang on. Okay, the war lasted 4 years following the defeat of Charles' royalist forces by the New Model Army led by Oliver Cromwell. Charles was captured and imprisoned. The House of Commons tried Charles for treason against England, and when found guilty, he was condemned to death. His death warrant states that he was beheaded on the 30th of January 1649. Following this, the British monarchy was abolished, and a republic called the Commonwealth of England was declared. And then I believe they're referring to Oliver Cromwell. Cromwell was born at Huntingdon, Cambridgeshire, blah, blah, blah. So, a leading Puritan figure, he raised cavalry forces and organized the New Model Army, which he led to victory over the Royalists at the Battle of Naseby in 1645. Failing to gain agreement on constitutional change in government with Charles I, Cromwell was a member of a special commission that tried and condemned the king to death. Cromwell declared Britain a republic. He went on to crush the Irish clans and the Scots loyal to Charles II. In 1653, he finally expelled the corrupt English Parliament and with the agreement of army leaders became Lord Protector, king in all but name. And then Richard Cromwell was Oliver Cromwell's third son. He was appointed the second ruling Lord Protector of England, Scotland, and Ireland, serving for just 9 months. Unlike his father, Richard lacked military experience, and as such failed to gain respect or support from his New Model Army. Richard was eventually persuaded to resign from his position as Lord Protector and exiled himself to France until 1680 when he returned to England. And then the Restoration, Charles II, 1660. Okay, so are we up to speed now? I think I am. Okay. All right. Let's go back a little bit. And during the interregnum, though this nation had then adopted the now fashionable name of a republic, the usurper ruled with a most despotic hand. I think they're talking about Oliver Cromwell, yeah? Destroying every establishment in church and state, and under the cloak of religion was guilty of almost every enormity, especially in his private conduct, which could stain the character of a governor. And therefore he most certainly was, as Lord Clarendon characterized him, though a great yet very wicked man. Okay. I believe that. I'm not familiar with Oliver Cromwell, so if you have a different opinion, please share it. When the rightful sovereign was established on the throne, so Charles II, yeah, though in gratitude he requited the services of those who had espoused the royal cause, yet his resigning himself to so great a degree of voluptuousness, not to say lewdness, his example and that of his court, much more corrupted the morals of the people than all the anarchy and rapine had done during the usurpation. Ooh, really? That's not good. The next sovereign, alienated from the affections of his subjects through the machinations of the... it's hard to read that, yeah? Implacable enemies, I think is what that says, of the Protestant religion, abdicated his throne and finished his days in exile. So I haven't read about that one, so let's move on. James II, or James VII, depending on your perspective. James VII of Scotland, James II of England. Yeah, the second surviving son of Charles I and younger brother of Charles II, James had been exiled following the Civil War and served in both the French and Spanish army. Although James converted to Catholicism in 1670, his two daughters were raised as Protestants. Weird. Okay. James became very unpopular because of his persecution of the Protestant clergy and was generally hated by the people. Sounds fun. Following the Monmouth uprising, Monmouth was an illegitimate son of Charles II and a Protestant, and the bloody assizes of Judge Jeffreys, Parliament asked the Dutch Prince William of Orange to take the throne. So then we move on to William III. And that's how they ended up the 17th century, yeah? I'm going to read William III really quick, and then we'll go back to our article. So William III, 1689 to 1702, as well as Mary II, yeah, from 1689 to 1694. All right, on the 5th of November, 1688, William of Orange sailed his fleet of over 450 ships, unopposed by the Royal Navy, into Torbay Harbor and landed his troops in Devon. Oh, sounds great. That's okay. Gathering local support, he marched his army, now 20,000 strong, onto London in the Glorious Revolution. Many of James II's armies had defected to support William, as well as James's other daughter, Anne. William and Mary were to reign jointly. Okay, William and Mary were to reign jointly, and William was to have the crown for life after Mary died in 1694. James plotted to regain the throne, and in 1689 landed in Ireland. William defeated James at the Battle of the Boyne, and James fled again to France as guest of Louis XVI. Whew. Okay, them saying that they had a rocky century before the 18th, yeah, I agree. That was not so fun, yeah. Lots of reigning kings and queens and like fighting over different things. Nope, not fun. Also, the whole revolution and civil wars and stuff. No, doesn't sound fun to me. These evils were perhaps exceeded by direct visitations from the judgments of the Almighty. Really? Okay, of the plague during that century died within the bills of mortality upwards of 150,000. Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that the Black Plague came to England in the 17th century. Yeah, sucks. I wouldn't call that the judgment of God, though. That's a virus. Yeah, it's a virus. Besides the great numbers it carried off in other parts of the kingdom, and to complete the distresses of the inhabitants of the metropolis in the year succeeding this dreadful calamity, they saw their city enveloped in flames, and more than 13,000 houses, with all their public buildings, reduced to ashes. Yeah, that was the Great Fire of London, yeah. Yeah, I do remember that was like at the same time as an outbreak of the plague. I feel like I had heard somewhere that people were quarantining during the plague, and that afterwards everything was burned down, like right around the same time. Sucks. They had a bad year. That was 1666, right? It was the terrible year for London, that's for sure. Though the nation recovered its character under the Protector and Charles II, and retrieved itself in a great measure from the distresses it had sustained, yet the Roman Catholic religion was making sure, though imperceptible, progress among the higher ranks of society during the reign of the latter, and which became to be so openly avowed under the indirect authority of his successor that it proved the downfall of himself and of the cause, which he in reality heartily espoused. Sorry, sometimes it takes me a moment to read it because it's so hard to read, it's very faded. Thus situated was the kingdom when William was called to the throne, and although it may be extending this digression, perhaps already too long, yet I trust my readers will pardon me, as a brief recapitulation of this reign will be elucidatory of many of the transactions which occurred in the succeeding century. Whew, that was hard to read. I already forgive him. Yeah, go ahead, tell me about William. The estates of the kingdom, being assembled under the name of Convention, declared the throne vacant by the king's abdication, and an offer of the crown being made to the Prince and Princess of Orange, it was accepted, and they were proclaimed King and Queen of Great Britain, and by the names of William and Mary, on February 13th, 1688-89. Though they were called by the voice of the people to be government of these kingdoms, yet the Constitution was founded on the most liberal principles, allegiance on the side of the people, and protection of that of the prince forming the great basis thereof. William, being thus happily placed on the throne, gave his assent to a bill for securing the rights and liberties of the people on the clearest and most advantageous foundation, and having prior to this abolished the hearth money and passed an act of toleration in behalf of the dissenters, rendered himself exceedingly popular to the majority of his subjects. Though the Revolution was thus peaceably established in Great Britain, except in the single instance of the Duke of Gordon retaining Edinburgh Castle, and the effort made by Lord Dundee in the Highlands, yet Ireland, being chiefly possessed by the Catholics, still remained faithful in its allegiance to James, and it was not till after 3 active campaigns, in the second of which the king commanded in person, and even the famous Battle of the Boyne, that it was reduced to obedience. Though this battle determined the fate of James, who immediately retired to Dublin, and from thence to France, yet it was purchased at a great expense by William in the loss of the venerable and brave Duke of Schonberg, second perhaps to none of the generals of his age, and superior to most of the private duties of a man and a Christian, and in the intrepid and persevering Walker, a clergyman, who so gallantly directed the unparalleled defence of Londonderry against the whole army of the late monarch. In the next campaign, the last effort of King James and the French being frustrated by the activity of General Ginkell and others, particularly at the Battle of Aghrim, their army defeated and all their strongholds reduced, Ireland quietly submitting to the government of King William. T. Mott FSM, to be continued. I think that the Irish would disagree that they quietly assented. Quietly submitted, yeah. Like, I'm just saying. I'm not criticizing them. I'm just, if I were Irish, I wouldn't say quietly assented. All right, the Wikipedia, the historic.uk.com article definitely mentioned those details, yeah, the Battle of the Boyne, defeating James, yeah, and that James ended up going to France to flee. Anyways, that was quite fascinating to me. I feel like we didn't really talk about the 18th century, like at all, because everything we mentioned was in the 17th century. I guess it's kind of a prequel of the 18th century, like, look back. I found that really fascinating. I don't know very much about British history, and I feel like I've missed all of these details. I don't know about that many of the monarchs of England and what they did. I have heard of Oliver Cromwell, and I have heard of William and Mary. I never knew that was because they were king and queen, like, together. I thought that it was a band. Like, I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna have to look it up. I suspect that it is also a band, but yeah. Apparently that's why they called themselves that. Makes sense to me. If their names happened to be William and Mary, and that was a famous phrase because of those two reigning together. That makes sense to me. Anyways, I found that very fascinating. I hope you enjoyed that as well. I look forward to reading more of these. So, thank you for watching the video. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.